My name's Alex Shieh, and I'm a rising junior at Brown University, one of the most exclusive institutions in the world. But I'm not here to glorify the Ivy League. I'm here to warn you that the promise of American higher education, of opportunity through meritocracy, is under attack. I'm a legacy student at Brown. I went to a prep school that feeds to the Ivy League, and my parents are doctors who can afford the $93,000 a year sticker price. In other words, I'm exactly who the Ivy League was built for. But what about the kids who weren't born on third base? Statistically speaking, for a smart kid from a poor family, an Ivy League degree can power their ascent to the upper income brackets better than anything else. That's the American dream. But today, that dream is now a luxury good. According to the New York Times, at Brown, the median student's family makes over $200,000 a year. Half the student body comes from the top 5% of earners. And research by Brown's own professor, John Friedman, shows that even equally qualified low-income students are vastly underrepresented. At this very moment, the American people are tightening their belts, and Brown is raising tuition to beyond $90,000 a year. And even while charging students the price of a luxury car, Brown is on track to run a $46 million deficit this year. Where's all the money going? I'll tell you where it's going. It's going into an empire of administrative bloat and bureaucracy. Brown employs 3,805 full-time non-instructional staff for just 7,229 undergrads. That's one administrator for every 2 students. This isn't education. This is bloat, paid for on the backs of students and families who are mortgaging their futures for a shot at a better life. Meanwhile, Grace Calhoun, Brown's athletic director, earns over $1 million. A household assistant on payroll tends to University President Christina Paxson. And when budget cuts are made, these expenses stay while the student experience deteriorates. My dorm floods when it rains, and the burger patties in our dining hall have been replaced by an unappetizing beef mushroom blend. The idea that Brown's administration can be streamlined isn't conjecture. We didn't used to have these many administrators. Across the nation, the number of university administrators has risen by 162% in recent decades. And it's no coincidence that correspondingly, the cost of education has risen 181% in inflation-adjusted dollars since the 90s. Across the pond, a world-class education at Oxford or Cambridge can cost about half as much as an Ivy League degree, in part due to a much lower administrative burden. The status quo has a real human cost. I recently learned of a brilliant young man from Pensacola, Florida, who got into Brown but was forced to walk away because the financial aid wasn't enough. Brown says it meets 100% of demonstrated need, but Brown gets to decide what that need is. Middle-class students in particular suffer from these policies, earning too much to qualify for generous scholarships, but not enough to go to Brown without straddling themselves with significant amounts of debt. And let's not forget that Brown is one of several Ivy League schools that settled a federal antitrust lawsuit last year for allegedly colluding to suppress financial aid offers. I'm a reporter for the Brown Spectator, and to document this problem, I created a website called Bloat at Brown that used AI to assess whether each administrative role was actually necessary. I sent each administrative employee a Doge-style email to ask them, what do you do all day? Instead of answering, Brown's response was retaliation. My social security number was leaked. Our website was hacked. And Associate Dean Kirsten Wolf launched a disciplinary investigation into a litany of baseless charges, such as emotional harm. Well, they couldn't get me. They charged every single board member of the Brown Spectator, an unprecedented attack on student journalism. But we refused to back down, and we won our hearings. There was no misconduct, only exposure, and that's what Brown feared the most. This committee has a responsibility, not just to investigate Ivy League antitrust violations, but to reclaim the American dream from those who have twisted it into a racket. I call on you today to subpoena Brown's president, Christina Paxson, and ask her why Brown costs $93,000 a year. The American dream isn't just for the legacies, the coastal elites, or the children of privilege. It belongs to the kid in rural Kansas with a 4.0 GPA, the first-gen student working a night shift, and the families who did everything right and still got priced out. They deserve a seat at the table. They deserve a shot at making it big. Their American dreams matter too. I thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I welcome your questions.
Is with us this morning. How you doing, and what's going on with this fight? What kind of prompted you to ask a very basic question? I'm spending a lot of money. How are you using it?
Oh, good morning. Brown has always had very high tuition prices, tuition and fees for the next school year is estimated to be around $93,000 a year. And I was concerned, not for myself. I think, as I mentioned in the hearing, I'm lucky enough that my parents are doctors and they can afford to pay that entire sticker price. But a lot of students can't. And that's why Brown looks the way that it does. At Brown University, half the student body hails from the top 5% of Americans. And I think that's unmeritocratic because the Ivy League is supposed to be where the best and the brightest go. That's what meritocracy is supposed to be. But when it's just full of a bunch of rich kids, we're not doing our part to uphold the American dream.
Did you get an answer, Alex, as to how tuition money is being allocated and spent?
I didn't get an answer from any of these administrators, but Brown just released its latest budget report like last week. And we see that by far the largest category of expenditures, 43%, if I'm not mistaken, is employee wages, accounting for a total $818 million. And again, we have 3,805 administrators at Brown University for an undergraduate population of about 7,000 and add on like 4,000 grad students. That's an incredibly insane ratio. And I think that something should be done about it so that the American dream can be more affordable.
You call Brown's response retaliation. What's your understanding as to why you were investigated because of asking the question?
Right. Well, essentially what we did was with journalism, we sent out an email. I'm a reporter for the Brown Spectator, which is a student newspaper at Brown. And then they hit us with disciplinary charges, as I mentioned, emotional harm, invasion of privacy, misrepresentation. They eventually cleared us of those ones. But the ones that they actually had us sit before for a hearing was violating a technology policy and charged against the entire board of directors of the Brown Spectator, not just me, but my entire board, for allegedly violating Brown's trademark policy, for saying that we were the Brown Spectator, which we are, because they see that infringes on Brown's trademark, despite a broad doctrine of case law saying that that this is a permissible use case. And in the end, we were cleared. But it's clear that they didn't charge other student newspapers that have the word Brown in their name. It's clear that they came after us because we were reporting the rot that was going on, and they didn't like that very much.
I would imagine, Alex, that this has sparked up quite a few conversations. What have been the responses that you have received, either in support or criticizing your move?
I think there's been a lot of support on campus from students who recognize that this bill is too high, from students who got into Brown but can't go because their financial aid packages aren't enough because of all the bloat that's going on. We've also gotten a lot of positive responses from the faculty because, again, we're talking about administrators here are bloated, not the faculty. And for too long, they've also felt disrespected that instead of seeing increases in their salaries or more funds allocated to research, the money is just going to associate vice provosts and DEI deans as opposed to actually going to the people who are teaching classes and doing important research. And so I think we've gotten a lot of support from them. As far as our detractors are, obviously the disciplinary deans weren't big fans, but it's surprising, right? Is that a lot of students weren't fans either. But I think that stat that I mentioned earlier, 50% of Brown comes from the top 5% of Americans. I think that for a lot of kids, the response is if $93K is too much for you, go somewhere else. And so I guess Ivy League is exclusive, and they don't want to open the doors to a more qualified but less wealthy class of students.
How has this impacted the education that you're getting right now at Brown?
Well, I've stayed on top of all of my classes, thankfully, but certainly is that it was tough with all the disciplinary stuff going on. But I think I learned something far more important from this. And I think they tried to silence me. They tried to make me back down, but I didn't. And I guess in the end, I won. I was vindicated. And here I am testifying before Congress to let the American people know that there's real problems going on. And I called on Congress to subpoena Brown's President Christina Paxson to testify before them, because I really think she's the one who should have to answer questions for why she's charging students so much.
And is there a plan? Have they reached out to you to sit down and to have a conversation about your concerns over bloated salaries?
Brown University has not. Besides disciplinary hearings, I have not had any contact with the administration, which I think is unfortunate because this is a very real problem that I think that they should be incorporating input from students on.
Brown University will no longer discipline a student who is accused of violating the school's code of conduct after sending a Doge-like email to university administrators.
Oh, this is so great. In the email, Alex Shieh, who was a reporter with a school paper, asked staff to, quote, 1, explain your role, 2, describe what tasks you performed in the past week. And 3, explain how Brown students would be impacted if your position was eliminated. And 4, comment on your current rating in our database. Brown University student Alex Shieh joins us now. Alex, well, you were doing some very interesting work. You are a journalist student. Explain to me what you hoped to get out of this, and then what the reaction from the university was.
Yeah, so prices at the Ivy League are just skyrocketing like crazy. At Brown, it's going to be $93,000 a year next year. And part of the reason why costs are growing so drastically across the board is because of the number of administrators. Now, I'm not talking about the professors here that teach your classes. I'm talking about people that sit at a desk in some administrative building and they write memos and they fill out spreadsheets. And there's 3,800 of them at Brown. And that's just insane. Since we're a small school, we've only got about 7,000 undergrads. And so I emailed all of them to the email you mentioned to ask them what happened. And I guess when you investigate the administration investigates you back. A bunch of deans teamed up to charge me with various things from emotional harm to violating the technology policy, and they just threw the entire rule book at me. But I mean, like you said, I was cleared earlier this week. They determined that I hadn't done anything wrong, and I think it's pretty clear this was retaliation against me because they didn't like my reporting.
So I'm just sort of digesting a few of the numbers that you just threw out. First, that Brown is going to charge 93 grand per year next year. That's wild. And then secondly, did you say that it was roughly a 1-to-2 administrator to undergrad ratio? That is also, I can't imagine how you could possibly justify that. I am curious, Alex, did any of these administrators or bureaucrats actually respond to your email and answer your questions?
We got some good responses. We got a person who told us how he runs the engineering workshop, and he sounds like a pretty important guy. But for the most part, Brown told people not to respond. And most of the communication that we got back was hostile. Like this dean charged not only me, but the entire board of my newspaper, the Brown Spectator. Do you know why? Because she said that naming ourselves the Brown Spectator is a trademark violation, even though there are a bunch of other student newspapers too that use the word Brown in their name. So it's pretty clear that this is just very flimsy, and they're covering up their antitrust violations. Congress is investigating Brown and the rest of the Ivy League now for price fixing and other violations of the Sherman Antitrust Act. I think it's pretty clear that there's something fishy going on here. They're trying to silence people who are exposing it.
Yeah, I really hope that we pull federal funding on all these private shishi universities. Frankly, I'm curious as to what your fellow students think about it, not the ones in your conservative paper who have also been persecuted by the university, but mainly the general population, the student body. Are they as outraged as you are at how many administrators there are per student, which is mind-blowing? Are they outraged by the tuition and what they're getting back from that outrageous amount of money?
Well, I think they fall into two camps. I think first, there are the reasonable ones who are like, yes, this is absolutely outrageous. There are way too many administrators. But I think a lot of people, you have to understand that a place like Brown is disproportionately wealthy. Like, it's full of a bunch of rich kids. It's supposedly the richest of all the Ivy League schools. And so something that I have heard a lot is if $93,000 is too much for your shot at the American dream, go somewhere else. And I think that's a really discouraging message, because I'm incredibly fortunate that my family can afford to pay such an outrageous sum for what is supposed to be a ladder to economic opportunity. But a lot of kids can't afford that. And then Brown is price fixing on their financial aid. So sometimes these financial aid packages aren't enough. And I think this is what happens when you have elitism gone amok, is that people are like, hey, $93,000, that's not a lot. If you can't pay that, go to community college. I think that we really need to be working on making the American dream more accessible so that everybody has a chance at it.
Well, we certainly shouldn't be subsidizing these schools. They make enough money. I really appreciate what you're doing, doging the administration at an Ivy League. Brilliant. Bravo. Kudos to you. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.